We've all heard rags to riches stories, but when it's a long, hard fought battle, that is completely different. And when that fight leads to long term success, that shows the heart of a champion. And that is the Francis Ngannou life story. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to The Sports Geek. I'm your host, Jackie Ray. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you never miss a video. Now, normally, we're going to give you some betting advice, but sometimes you have to bet on yourself, which is why I'm really excited to dive headfirst into the life story of Francis Ngannou. Ngannou grew up in a small village located in the western province of Cameroon. A lot of times, village life is simple but happy, but that is not the case for Francis Ngannou. No child should be subjected to physical abuse, and they should never have to watch their mother be repeatedly beaten. Sadly, Francis experienced both. To make things worse, he began hard labor when the rest of us were playing hide-and-go-seek or Marco Polo. Instead, Francis, better known as the Predator, started working in the mines when he was just 10 years old. While making an appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, he said, quote, "Even though that work was meant for adults, but we didn't have any option. We take what we had at the time." As if manual labor at 10 wasn't bad enough, after the demise of his father, not only was he being raised by his single mother, he also spent most of his time taking care of her. He would go hungry for an entire day, sometimes because he had nothing to eat, no money to buy food. He would work in the minefield on weekends and on national holidays. Francis Ngannou wouldn't even go to his hometown during the winter holidays and tried to do everything he could to contribute to his family. While doing all of that, he had to make time to get an education as well. He would walk 2 hours every day to school while also working in the mines. He would continue to do that until the age of 17. If you think there was a glimmer of joy during the Predator's childhood, you would be wrong. He said, quote, "Don't find it fun to talk about my childhood. It's not happy for me. It's sad. I always admire people when I sit around and see people, friends, or someone else talking about their childhood, their friends when they were kids, all the things they were doing, their cartoons, kind of like the culture. I feel like those are the missing parts of my life." Francis Ngannou decided the best way to change his life was to come to the States, but that was not a straight and narrow path. But it didn't matter. He had one goal: leave Cameroon and become world champion. The first stop on his journey to do that was Nigeria, but that meant he had to meet bribes, face humiliation to the extent where officers would even strip him down and take everything he had before allowing him to move any further. But that goal kept pushing him. So from there, he had to walk across the blazing desert sands of the Sahara Desert. The walk was long and very difficult. By the time he made it to Algeria, he was completely dehydrated, so much so that he drank from a well that had a dead animal rotting inside. He said his thought process was, if I drink this, I may die, but if I don't, I will die. Horrible choice, but one he had to make. From there, he went to Morocco, where he hid from police in the forest and often ate from trash. But police eventually caught him. In fact, they caught him 6 times and dropped him back in the forest of Algeria. Then he made it to Spain, where he called the Red Cross, who picks him up and puts him in an isolation prison cell. Ngannou would spend 2 months in that Spanish cell and started living in a parking lot after he was released. Honestly, I'm exhausted telling this story. Living in these kinds of hardship would break the will of most of us. At the very least, may have caused us to turn back. But in Francis' case, that was not an option, because what was he going to go back to? He said his hometown in Cameroon is hopeless. The people there have been forgotten and don't even have some of the basic needs that we take for granted. So for him, the fight to become world champion was a fight he had to win for himself and his family. But the quest to become world champion was in boxing. But once he made it to France, he started training under quality coaches, and they got him to shift his attention to mixed martial arts. But even that didn't come easy. His time in Paris was met with homelessness and living in parking lots. He was homeless. Let that sink in, because while having no place to call his own, this is where he found happiness. He said, quote, "When I went to France, it was very interesting to see people complaining about everything. Here was free. You can find a peaceful place to eat for free. And for me, this was heaven. I was homeless at the time, but I think this was one of the best moments in my life. I was somewhere that I cannot care about being sick or what to eat for the first time in my life. If nothing else, all of us should take a moment and start to feel more grateful about the lives we lead. To be homeless in Paris and to feel free, that is a story we all can learn from. It was 10 years from the time Francis Ngannou set a goal to become a world champion boxer to the time he even set foot in a gym to ask for help in reaching that goal. He was still homeless, had no money, but he asked for someone to take a chance on him and train him. That is when he met Ferdinand Lopez, but he met him at the MMA factory. Francis wanted to be like Mike Tyson. He had no interest in mixed martial arts, but he was doing this to change his life and the life of his family. And his coaches told him if you want to do that, and if you want to do that quickly, you have to look at the MMA. That was enough, and Francis started training for the UFC, even though he didn't know what the UFC was. So Ferdinand Lopez gave Francis Ngannou some MMA gear and allowed him to train and sleep at the gym for no cost, thus starting Francis Ngannou's MMA career. His MMA career began in November of 2013, and he won his first fight by submission in the first round. His second fight did not go as well. He lost his 2-round fight by a unanimous decision, but that was the last fight he would lose in the regional circuit, and just 2 years later, he made his UFC debut. If you wonder why they call him the Predator, his UFC debut should easily answer that question. Ngannou picked up a brutal KO win over Luis Henrique in December of 2015. He followed that up with a TKO win over Curtis Blaydes, and the hits literally kept coming. He stomped 2 MMA greats and earned his first title opportunity against Stipe Miocic at UFC 220. This all seemed a little too fast for a title fight, right? And you're fighting Stipe Miocic, who at the time only 3 fighters had beaten? That is insane. At least that is what I was thinking, and turns out that is what the Predator was thinking as well. He said, quote, "When I look back at it, I felt upset. I was still very new to the sport. I didn't have as much experience and I was pressuring myself. It was just a lot going on." UFC 220 was my first real introduction into Francis Ngannou, and you could just tell he was not ready. But honestly, your first loss coming during a title match, that should not be taken lightly, and you would think he could have still been able to walk out of that fight with his head held high. But the emotions of losing his first UFC match by unanimous decision carried over into his next fight. In UFC 226, he only landed 11 of his 46 strike attempts. His opponent, Derek Lewis, landed 20 of his 54 attempts, but Lewis also failed both of his submission attempts. This wasn't a battle that Ngannou should have lost physically, but he definitely lost a mental battle. But when we fall down, we get back up. And when you really learn the history of Ngannou, you know his fight to get back up is relentless. Fighter after fighter after fighter all had to fall victim to a smarter and a more determined Ngannou in his first round. And now it's time for the rematch. It's time to once again meet Miocic in the octagon for the heavyweight title fight. When you see these kinds of rematches, you always wonder if a fighter is going to fall victim to their previous loss replaying in their head, especially when they find themselves in trouble or take a big hit, which is why the preparation is not only physical, it is mental as well. But like I said, now we are dealing with a much smarter Francis Ngannou, and the smart thing to do is revisit what you were doing that brought you to your initial success, which is exactly what he did. He moved back to Paris for 3 weeks and made significant improvements to his game. This time, he landed 65% of his strike attempts and knocked out Miocic 52 seconds into the second round. And on March 22, 2021, Francis the Predator Ngannou completed his goal and became the UFC heavyweight world champion. Not only is this a feat that should be celebrated because of all the trials and tribulations it took for him to get to this point, but also because in achieving his goal, he gave Stipe Miocic a much-needed slice of humble pie. Just 3 days before the fight, Miocic told BT Sports no other UFC heavyweight will become champion until he decides to retire. So, I hope that humble pie was warmed up for you, Miocic. Meanwhile, Francis Ngannou still goes back to visit his homeland and the sand mines in Cameroon. And he is no doubt an inspiration to the kids there who he says often give up because no one else cares about them. But it is moments like these that instill hope not only in the young people of Cameroon, but in all of us. I thought the win over Miocic might mean retirement for the Predator, as he indicated in the past. But if the money can be worked out, we can expect to see a fight between Francis Ngannou and John Jones sometime this summer. We'll keep you posted on all of that because that's going to be a fight you definitely want to see. But the main lesson to take from this is always bet on yourself. I'm Jackie Ray for The Sports Geek, and we'll see you next time.